All right, so we are live on Facebook. Welcome, everybody. If you can hear me, hit the wow face or the like button, or share it to your page and help us get this in front of more people. Especially if you have a lot of friends that like the National Corvette Museum, Motorsports Park, or Corvette fans, or just like racetracks in general. It's one of the best in our country, and we're going to learn a lot about that from Matt Busby today. But if you don't know me, I'm Andrew Rains from Apex Pro. I appreciate you guys taking part of your evening out to be with us here and learn some stuff. I'm going to share this over to my personal page real quick. And you guys all do the same. Just hit the share button, and the wow face really helps. Also, let us know the next event you plan to go to NCM. Comment the next event you're going to be at NCM. There's Marlon. Awesome. Marlon, someone's on. But go ahead and let us know when you plan to be at NCM, and that way we can kind of tailor what we're doing to you guys really specifically. I'm going to share this really quickly, and then I'll be right back. Sometimes I have a hard time doing this, though. Okay, it's not working. Share on your timeline. Here we go. All right. Okay, well, we got Matt Busby here with us. So, Matt, welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. We got 14 people on right now, so we've already got a little bit of a crowd. I see Ray has joined us. Ray reached out to me earlier specifically about learning some stuff about NCM. And Michael Cooper is going to be there with NASA in October. So we've got a bunch of NCM drivers. So that's great, guys. But I know you all probably hopefully have heard of Matt or have seen him at NCM before. And I think he's just got more track knowledge than anyone else I could possibly think of when it comes to NCM. And I just wanted to let Matt kind of preach the gospel a little bit about the racetrack, and then we'll answer y'all's questions as we go. But Matt, man, how did you get into motorsports, and how did this all happen? How did you end up at NCM?
Yeah, so I think just like most people, I've been into it since I was a little kid, and being around New Orleans, we had in the really early '90s we had two IMSA races. The Grand Prix of New Orleans that went like through the French Quarter and downtown and everything. It was super cool. And I went to go see those as a kid. And I was just so like fascinated as to how all those things happened, and the whole thing, it just captivated me. And so I've been really fortunate to have a lot of opportunities in like karting, and I got to do some stuff with Formula cars, Porsche Cup cars, Ferrari Challenge cars. I've driven and helped coach or do data in a lot of cars. So it's just been a long journey of an obsessive hobby.
Awesome. That sounds super familiar. I haven't done a lot of stuff with like Ferrari Challenge cars or anything, but I can definitely relate. It's cool. My dad's mentioned to me about like the IMSA race that was in New Orleans, and I think there was a street race in Miami too, back in the same era of like early or late kind of GTP era. That's super cool. That must have been awesome.
Yeah, so funny story. Our general manager, Mitch Wright, actually raced in the Grand Prix of New Orleans, and so obviously we didn't know each other, but he said the GTP cars of that era just hopped from corner to corner because the roads were so bumpy.
I bet. My dad told me they used to weld down the manhole covers for those.
Yeah.
Because the ground effect would suck them off the ground. Oh man, that's crazy. Well, what is a day in the life? So when you wake up and go to the track, I think a lot of people would be interested to know before we start talking about driving. What does a day in the life look like for you? I mean, we see it on the radio at events, but when there's not a big event weekend, or what are you doing for your 9 to 5 basically?
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of folks I guess don't realize, or maybe they do, is being involved in operating a facility takes an incredible team, and it takes a whole bunch of people to wear a lot of hats, right? So you have to be really comfortable doing a lot of different things, and that can be, for me, we could show up and it could be an event day where we get there pretty early, around 6:30 in the morning, and make sure that the track is clean and the gates are open and all the safety crews are on site, all the equipment works, and then we do our safety meetings, and then getting with like our organizer, making sure that they have all that they need, and then just being there as kind of a support for whoever's there. On a non event day. It could be a little bit of everything. Setting up an autocross, painting curbs, working on cars. Today, fixing IT issues where our phones and internet have been going in and out for the last couple of days. So we're trying to diagnose that. We're prepping for some for next year's financial stuff. So sit down and do a budget. So there's a little bit of everything that goes into it, and it's and some days you get to throw your helmet on and go drive, right? So it's definitely one of those things where you have to be really versatile, really flexible, and be able to adapt to chaos.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure there's so many things that go on that we, as a event participant or a vendor in our case, or something that we don't even realize. And fortunately, I've had a lot of friends, and being in the industry, I've known a lot of people that run either track events or have some track management type role. And so I can appreciate that it's a lot of work, and you need, like you said, you got to have a team pulling in the same direction. And from what I can tell, every event I've been to at NCM, you guys you're on the same page. You do a really good job. You're not afraid to get super hands-on and just make stuff happen. But you mentioned pulling your helmet on and doing some driving. How often do you get to turn laps?
It depends. We do touring laps, which are lead follow type laps, as well as hot laps, which are you come in, you pay $125, and you get the passenger seat, and either Mitch, myself, or Griff Tomlin will kind of take you around and show you the place at speed. And so it could be, we could do 25, 30 hot laps in a week, and then we do have some weeks where we only do 2 or 3. Same with touring laps. It's kind of hot and cold. We're right there on the interstate, so it usually coincides with the tourism. So like spring break, summer break, all that kind of fun stuff are really, really busy times for us. But yeah, I mean, we could on a bad week we'll turn 100 laps.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You took me on a couple laps last year at SCCA Time Trials Nationals, their inaugural event there, and it was just so cool getting your perspective. I could tell I do a ton of laps at Barber Motorsports Park down here in kind of a similar way when I do work out there, and I very much so could just feel that I wouldn't have that muscle memory or that understanding of the track developed, but it was so cool because you have such a bird's eye perspective when you drive that track, and that's what I wanted to kind of share with our audience is you're able to think about so many different things because you've got the muscle memory built up and every inch of the pavement, and I think that's really cool. Trevor Bonner says that you beat his time at LS Fest this past weekend by a second, and he was a little butthurt.
Yeah, we had a good weekend.
There you go. I like that. Politically correct. Trevor, I'm glad you're listening, man. You're doing the right thing. That's awesome. What a cool community. But so obviously you get to do a lot of laps. That's cool. And when we talked I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago and just asked, I'm preparing some data stuff. We're doing a video with Racers 360 exclusive scoop. That's the first time you guys have heard that here. They're going to be promoting a video that we did showing how to use Apex Pro data, and it goes in depth with a couple corners at NCM. And so I asked Matt, hey, where do you think I should emphasize? What do you think is important? And I spent a lot of time the last 2 times I've been at NCM talking about turn 5 because it's big and scary and fast, and then a couple other places as well. But I just thought your answers are really interesting because you said turns 2, 3, and then 11 through 13, and then you also said the entrance to the sinkhole. But maybe why are those the places that you think people should prioritize over others? And then maybe we can jump into those corners specifically for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so just generally, regardless of what racetrack you go to, you always kind of want to focus on the corners that lead onto the longest straights, right? So the corners that are going to lead to the longest linear acceleration. At our racetrack specifically, I think a lot of folks do focus on turn 5 and turn 16 a bunch, but you have to realize that both of those corners as they are very, very fast, they are both relatively short, like linear feet-wise, and they both lead into deceleration zones. So you can you can give away some time in those corners, and you never want to give away time in corners, but you can give away time in those corners, and it doesn't have repercussions later in the lap, right? So, if you think of every major braking event as a reset, so to speak, turn 6 is a reset that leads you on to a really important section of the racetrack from 6 to 10. 10 would be kind of a reset, and then from 10 off all the way to 15 is a really, really important. Same with the chicane, stuff like that. So to break the racetrack down into sectors like that, I always just tend to gravitate to breaking it down into major braking events, because that's where I can, if I screwed up 2 corners in that previous segment, well, all right, I get to start all over now that I've slowed the car down, and I can start over, attacking a different sector of the racetrack.
Yeah, I really like how you put, and this is something I've talked about recently, is leading into a deceleration zone. Get my words mixed up, but that's an area. So, like you said, both 5 and 16, they lead into an area where you're then going to be hard on the brakes. You're not trying to get a good exit and get back on the throttle to accelerate for a long period of time. And I like how you broke it down, because I think a lot of people may not think about the distance that corner actually takes up. And while those 5 and 16, which are, I'm holding up a track map, and Baker, if you can post the link to the Speed Secrets track map for NCM, that'd be awesome. Baker's going to comment as Apex Pro, and you guys can download this thanks to Ross Mintley for these track maps. But Matt's talking about, when he says the 2 faster corners, turn 5 and turn 16, for you guys that have been there, are both high-speed sweeping corners, but you're braking hard after you exit both of those corners. So your exit speed's not really as important as your average speed through the corner or your minimum speed. But his emphasis was that because both of those lead into a place where you're braking, a braking occurrence immediately afterwards, if you give up time there, it's not as bad as if you give up time, say, exiting turn 2 right here. I think that's a brilliant way to look at it, because a lot of times, and I spent a lot of time talking about Mid-Ohio recently, because I went up there for a NASA event, and we talked about prioritizing areas of the track. And I think that's what you just did right there. So anyone that's watching that's an NCM regular, put more emphasis on turn 2 and 3 than on turn 5, right? Am I barking up the right tree?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so turn 2 and turn 3, turn 2, focusing in on that a little bit more. Turn 2 is also really, really important, because it's the second slowest corner on the racetrack. So you're going to this big deceleration event into a critical early apex to put you onto the second longest straightaway on the racetrack. So if you're underdriving, you can still get a decent exit. But what we see a lot of is most people are overdriving turn 2. So they overdrive turn 2, and what it does is it either puts you over the rumble strips, driver's left, or it delays your throttle application. And that doesn't necessarily mean 100% throttle, but like if you can't set the weight on the rear early in that corner, you kind of give up some of the balance throughout the radius to really put the power down.
Yeah, and that's a corner, that 2-3 complex in a high horsepower car, where because the corner continues to turn, you turn really sharply at 2, but then you have kind of another bend of the hands you have to continue to make. In a really high horsepower car, you've really got to back that corner up and really think about where you want to be, 500 feet down the track, right? Maybe in a Miata, or, it's different.
It's one of those corners that, contrary to what some may have been taught really early, you're solid state on your wheel while adding more throttle, or in some very rare cases, you may be adding a little bit of wheel while on throttle, and that just generally is usually a recipe for disaster. But it's one of those corners that if you get it a little bit wrong, you could put yourself in some pretty precarious position.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to look at it, and I think it's cool to share that run from 3 to 5 is the second longest straightaway on the track, right? So that's longer than the acceleration occurrence you have on the front straight, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's not something that I really thought about or knew. So that's huge. A minute ago, Ray Brake asked he could use Matt's help on the Thursday before Time Trials Nationals. You want to ride with me and drive a few laps? So we'll have to make that happen, Ray. We'll get Matt talking to you, and I think that's the plan for that Holly test day is to do some pairings like that. So hopefully we can all work together and find some ways to ride with some faster folks and do some data as well. We'll be hosting a classroom, so that's pretty awesome. It looks like Time Trial Nationals is going to be an awesome turnout, so I think that's going to be a killer event. Let's talk about.
Super pumped for that.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Will you be driving your new C5? New to you, C5?
I will in Max 1.
Gotcha. Is it classed appropriately, or is it a little out of class?
It's an underdog, but we're originally in Prep 1, but there was only like one other car, and I think the competition is more fun than the driving for me. So yeah. we kind of up the class, and we'll see where we're at.
Cool. Well, my plan to bring a race car was foiled by the fact that I'm getting married on Saturday, and I'll be on my honeymoon next week. So I had some plans in the works, but there just wasn't enough time in the day to, in the couple of months leading up to put it all together. So I'll be sitting on the sidelines in jealousy, but I'm excited to see your build. I've been following it on Instagram and Facebook, and I think that'll be cool. But let's as far as the 11 through 13 complex, that's Deception. What do people need to know about Deception? Because I think it's a pretty big deal to be able to get that right. And then, like you said, with 3, there's a long straightaway right after Deception that leads up over to Tabletop. What are the keys through there, you think?
So the area of Deception is obviously the name sounds a little dubious if you haven't driven it, but it is definitely an area of the racetrack that your sight line, as you enter it, you're going uphill on throttle, and the apex is blind. But so is the way the visual of the exit is really deceiving. So you think you can roll just a boatload of speed through the middle of the corner, and then all of a sudden you kind of get 10 feet further down the racetrack, and you see, holy crap, racetrack goes to the right and sharply. So you kind of have to really know what's there. What doesn't help, two kind of little things about 12. The curved driver's right is a trampoline, so if you touch it even a little bit, it's going to send you in the air. And the curving on the left is actually, every rumble strip on our racetrack is in the runoff areas. That's the one area our concrete contractor kind of messed up. So the runoff of the rumble strips is actually on the track surface. So it cheats you. The one place that you can't be cheated at the racetrack, it cheats you out of 18 to 20 inches of racetrack. So it's one of those things that you're kind of threading a needle. You're going pretty quick. Just if memory serves me, if you were going really fast, you're probably rolling 74, 75 miles an hour to the apex of 12 with, again, on throttle with a lot of wheel in the car. And then you're staring kind of like going up the S's at Watkins Glen. You're staring at Armco on both sides of you, and it's pretty close, right? Yeah. So it's a pretty unnerving corner. But it all starts with your exit at 10, getting a really good exit out of 10, and having a good settled car underneath you. There's some curving driver's left at what we would call, I guess, 11, that we put there because so many people got used to putting wheels off into the grass, and we got tired of backfilling it with dirt and grass and all that kind of stuff. But now it's become part of the track, and it's actually pretty critical to opening up your entry to 12. A good turn-in, it all happens a lot quicker than you think. So even though the apex is a little late-ish, it's a proper mid to late apex, your turn-in is actually a lot earlier than what you would think. And then for me, I like to roll a lot of speed, like in my Miata and my FRS, 12 was flat. In the Corvette, not so much. But it's one of those where you're just trying to get on the throttle so early because if we take the apex at turns 12, and carry it all the way to the top of 15, that is by far the longest straightaway on the racetrack. So getting a really clean, settled exit out of 12 is so critical to carrying a bunch of speed to that middle sector through 13, over tabletop and up through Croix Rouge or 15.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's interesting, the distinction, because in a relatively low horsepower car, or what a lot of people refer to as a momentum car, I tend to say a very grippy car, a car with more grip than grunt. You're on the floorboard all the way through there. And John Allen commented, he's a Spec Miata racer, and John's super quick, and I believe won a race at NCM earlier this year. But he's asking, in a higher horsepower car, can you get the back straight top speed you want without the lift in 11? So I guess he's saying if you have to back out of it in a high horsepower car, can you still achieve? Can you manage not to lose too much time down the back straightaway, or is like in your car, Matt, in your C5, is the lift? If you're on a really hot lap with good tires, can you keep it pretty much pinned, or are you kind of managing the weight no matter what you have to do to get the nose to bite there and not carry too much speed?
Yeah, I think you hit it. So I think the speed adjustment or what I do with my feet is more important to where the grip is. So if I'm having to manipulate the car either with the lift or manipulate the car with the brake, it's more to get the front to bite through an abrupt input as opposed to needing to scrub the speed. So the 12, the exit at 12 kind of opens up more than it looks, but yeah, you may have to, like in my C5, it's a lift, and it's a lift that is timed with my steering input, and then if you've overdone it, you can kind of catch the car with the rear, with the throttle a little bit, but it's one of those things that definitely needs to be practiced and worked up to. Don't go out there and try to flat-foot it or bury a ton of speed in there without kind of knowing the consequences, or more importantly, having an exit plan. Yeah. Especially at 12. Most of the incidents that we have, you'll notice, like if you ever drive it out there or anything like that, there's tire wall on both sides of the racetrack. The tire wall on the left is actually for the motorcycles. We do a lot of bike events. The tire wall on the right is for the car guys. So what ends up happening is they roll a lot of speed through 12, and maybe the car picks up a mid-corner or understeer. Yeah. And it scares them because they're staring at runoff or curbing, and what they do is they immediately lift with all of that wheel in the car. Yeah. So what happens is, of course, all the weight goes forward, and the rear tries to follow it, and you end up hooking it into the tire wall driver's right. Yeah. Whereas at 12, we actually, a couple of years ago, we moved the Armco back about 55, 60 feet, to where if you completely, brutally overdrive 12, all you have to do is straighten your hands and commit to going into the grass. You're not going to hit anything. So it's the panic that usually gets people into trouble there. So, go through it, and as you start to pick up more and more speed, just like anything else, as you up the risk, try to have an exit strategy. Or if you don't have an exit strategy, know that you're doing this without an exit strategy. But yeah, 12 is definitely one of those in planning your next move while you're doing your first one.
Yeah, I like that a lot, have an exit strategy. And I think a really important component there, and you mentioned it early on, and is the topography of the track there, because it's going uphill as you enter. So about the time you turn in, especially with a relatively early turn in, you have a lot of grip. Because the car is being forced into the ground by driving uphill, and then when around the apex or so, the track starts to flatten out, and that's when people realize, I overcooked it, I carried too much, I didn't speed check enough, or I think probably even more so than that, they get the feeling that they overcooked it. The car might be able to take it with the right technique and the right input, but a lot of times it's too fast too soon, especially with cars that we can affordably drive on track today that have so much capability, right? I'm sure that's something that calls people out a lot, is just that slight elevation change and grip loss. And I kind of liken it to turn 5 at Road Atlanta, maybe, as you as you exit, just with that. A lot of people have that same exact thing where they end up going and hitting the wall to the direction they have steering input because the car gets light and they let off the throttle.
Hooking it into the wall, driver's left at 5. I've seen cars do that a bunch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The car that when I got my racing license, the guy I shared my car with, the Miata, when I did Skip Barber, he hooked it and destroyed the front end of the car there. The first time I was ever at Roto Lynn, and that was an interesting thing. But it's all about that response and not having an exit strategy, and then also there's a over time, your brain and your mind and your eyes start to acclimate to that kind of oh shit moment or that process of when everything goes wrong. Less is more, right? I think a lot of people want to fix it too much, and sometimes you have to, right? You kind of relax. You look where you want the car to go. You add some corrective steering. You balance the car with the throttle a little bit, and that takes a lot of time to get that just right.
Yeah, so I think you hit it with the vision. I think that's the biggest thing that we work with, either me or with the coaching we do. The common denominator we see with most folks' vision is, as things get a little bit more stressful, people's natural inclination is their eyes just start lowering further and further and further down until they're making sure that hood emblem's not going anywhere. And that's when you get yourself into trouble. I think that's really important. Terry Yearwood has this cone that he used to put out at Sebring, and for like races, skippy schools, everything. I remember this cone was always there, and I actually thought a few years ago during an IMSA race. But it's the exit onto the back straight. I can't remember what corner that is. It might be 16 or 15. But it's a cone that's out just in the middle of the grass. And Terry would always kind of hit on it. It's like, why is that there? It's like, well, when you start to lose it, your eyes just naturally pick up, why the hell is there this orange cone in the middle of the grass? Well, that's where we want your eyes to go if you're about to wreck, is over there, because that's where you're just subconsciously going to put the car. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of stuck with me for a long time. And so the higher your eyes can get, the more information you're taking in. And the more information you're taking in, the calmer you're going to be as to how you react to things, and the whole process slows down when you're looking up as opposed to looking down.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where that term, eyes up, and we hear that in instructing circles and at track events constantly as well. You just want to get your eyes up, right? And I think it's one of those things that it makes a lot of sense once you do it, and then you fail to get your eyes up for a session. Like I'm fairly infrequently racing these days, every couple of months. And so when I get in the car, I always have that first couple of laps of forcing my vision to elevate further down the track. And so that I'm looking past the corner that I'm in, and I'm not just, like you said, making sure that hood emblem's still there. And once I start to do that, then I kind of define what that eyes up mentality means for me. And I think it's eyes up is separate from whether you're a visual learner or a kinesthetic learner. I think you have to, for your body physically and biologically to work right, your eyes have to be farther down the track to process that information. And then people have different learning styles that help them accumulate that information and understand where to place the car on the track and how to do that. And with some people, they're very visual and some people aren't. But that kind of leads into instructing, which is the next question I had, which is, what are the common mistakes that you see when you're instructing people? And we already kind of hit on vision, but maybe if we can go into corner specific, what do you see when you're working with drivers or people at NCM that they do on the entry to the sinkhole and the sinkhole complex? Because I think that's another place that you hit on, and I think it's really important and maybe kind of, I don't know, overlooked or underlooked. I don't really know which way to look at it, because I feel like a lot of people emphasize the sinkhole because it's a unique feature and it's something really cool about your racetrack, but also there's a big grip loss there. And so kind of like Madness at Mid-Ohio, if you go to Madness, a lot of times people are going, well, you can't gain anything there. You can't lose, it's a throwaway. You're just setting up for the next corner because there's no grip. I don't know if I 100% agree with that or not, but what do you see that people do, the mistakes they make on the sinkhole kind of complex area?
So one thing that we talk a lot about when we're doing like track walks or coaching or anything like that is especially like through 18, and the kind of half joke I make all the time is, there's 100 ways through 18, and 95 of them are right. But the most important thing is chassis balance and where your hands are as you crest the hill. Regardless of how you got through 18 or where you're positioning the car, if you're in a position where you are solid, like steady state in the wheel, or if you're having to add steering input, you're putting yourself in a pretty bad spot. Not only just from hey, the front may bite and the butt may not have the grip that you want, but more importantly, you're now looking to go downhill using all that gravitational help, that cheat mode, with a whole bunch of wheel in the car, and that's just going to naturally slow the car down. The magic of sinkhole all happens on the downhill. As much on throttle as you can get down that hill with gravity helping you and everything like that. And then it just, it all kind of comes, you get to the bottom of the hill and it immediately goes left and uphill. And as it goes uphill, it goes on camber. So the more speed you can bury down at the bottom of that hill, the more speed you can carry up the hill. And then it just becomes a matter of balancing the chassis. But the magic, the thing that we see the most is somebody says, okay, I've made my turn in for sinkhole, and then they don't make an adjustment right before you crest the hill of. And so whether that's a lift to put some weight on the front, whether that's back off the steering wheel and back into the steering wheel to kind of trick the chassis into leaning a little bit more. But you have to do something. You're either going to go over slow to make the corner or have to manipulate the car. And so if you're not manipulating the car, you're over slowing.
That's fascinating. That's really good information right there, because the technique involved to do that, and I think the whole point that we're proving with all this is that if you haven't been to NCM, you need to go, because any track where you have to either trick the car into doing something so that you can go fast or you're going too slow means it's a challenging corner. And to me, that sounds like some old school VIR or Road America type stuff, or something that's on a track that's been around for 60 years. And I think it's cool that NCM has that. But that also some and I posted this in the comments while you were saying it. The magic of sinkhole all happens in the downhill, and that's really cool. And I see this a lot in the data, and I've got an NCM data session pulled up here. But you can definitely see people gain the most time in the sinkhole complex when they're accelerating and they're kind of jumping, for lack of better terms, down into the sinkhole itself. I don't know. That just seems to line up with exactly what you were thinking. And then that manipulation of the car on the exit kind of has to happen to get the car pointed, because as soon as you exit the sinkhole, right, that's kind of starting the exit onto the front straightaway for, especially for low horsepower cars. You're probably pinned again to the firewall pretty soon after that, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's one of those things where you can get a good acceleration down. You can even on a street tire, we've got data where we're seeing a sustained 1.4, 1.5, even 1.6 on the uphill of sinkhole, and that kind of load and that kind of mechanical grip is just insane. On anywhere, and to be able to do something like that makes it really cool to set you up for the S's, which is really, really important. Again, talking about corner complexes that lead on the front, straightaways and stuff like that. The S's are also really, really important, and the S's actually start at the bottom of the sinkhole. So, and like a Miata or a BRD or something like that, the straightaways start at the bottom of the sinkhole, and that's kind of a lot to kind of wrap your head around the first few times you drive it, especially as you're trying to find speed. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why this track's such a great place to hold the SCCA Time Trials National event, because it's got so many of these nuances and these challenges. Like that statement alone, because I don't know, that whole part of the track's so sophisticated. I'm looking at some data right here from a NASA classed spec 944, and this driver's sustaining about over -1
lateral G, which would just be left turning G's over one lateral G the entire way through the sinkhole, from the compression at the, right when he jumps down into the sinkhole all the way is in 1.3 at some points, which for a 200 tread wear based, or maybe it's 100 tread wear based tire, and that car is fairly impressive. But the entire way, and you can just see the amount of G's that the car and the driver are being subject to there. So I'm sure that just from the raw emotion that amount of G-force creates, that is a big part of the challenge, like you were saying, to get in the car squared up to kind of get on the backside of the exit of the sinkhole so that you have a nice late apex to allow for early throttle application run through those S's onto the front stretch.
Yeah, it's just everything about the things that we try to teach, especially at NCM. We say it all the time, and we try not to be biased. We really want to make an atmosphere where people want to come and kick ass, right? So people go to the racetrack that they kick ass at, and so we want to do everything we can to help people feel like NCM is the kind of place that they come to kick ass at. But the nuance, the idiosyncrasy, and the technicality of NCM makes that something to where it's something of a committal. You have to really commit to understanding, the differences and the difficulty it is to carry a lot of speed through a lot of corners at NCM, and it's something that I'll maintain. If you can really find the technique and the courage to go really fast at NCM, you could show up to any racetrack in North America and within a day start to feel comfortable.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It has everything. It's got some straightaways. It's got some high-speed corners, really high-speed corners, actually turn 5 wicked fast. And then it's got some really technical stuff. And I love my personal favorite style of corner, or just driving in general, is the nuanced corners, kind of the deception style corners, or the sinkhole, where you've got that extra component of elevation that you have to really manage the car through. Because I think that's what really allows really, really good drivers and great drivers to separate themselves, is figuring that stuff out. And John Allen just commented, if you're a fan of tracks like VIR, Pit Race, Barber, or even Sonoma, and you haven't driven NCM, then you owe it to yourself. And I think those are all pretty apt comparisons. I mean, when I look at data, like a car with downforce through turn 5, well over 100 miles per hour at the apex of turn 5. And that's a super fast corner. And we're talking about a track that was built, how recently, Matt? 2013?
What's that?
When was the track built?
So the track was built in 2011.
2011.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking Noah. Track was built through 2013, opened in 2014.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's awesome that there's a corner that's like, I'm looking at the Spec 944 data right now, and at the apex of turn 5, he's doing 100 miles an hour in a base 944 with 140 horsepower, and it's pretty much flat to the floor the whole way through there. And I think that kind of corner, but it's built in a pretty safe way. But you just don't see a lot of new tracks, especially the more country club style tracks, and some of the places with a lot of tighter corners that lead into a lot of the stuff that you see with the Herman Tilke design circuits and stuff like that. But NCM's got some of the ballsy, committed stuff too, because I think 16's kind of that way too. It's fast. The entry's high speed.
Definitely full committal, and that's the thing. That's one thing. So usually when somebody says that a racetrack is technical, sometimes it's kind of a backhanded way of saying a racetrack's slow. That is not the case at NCM. It's very technical. It's very nuanced, and it's very difficult. And what makes that really, really tough for guys is that there's 3 different straights that in a proper car you're seeing 130, 140 miles an hour 3 times the lap. There's a couple 100-mile-an-hour corners. It's a difficult place to really get comfortable. Yeah,
absolutely. It sounds a lot like VIR when you start really looking at it in that way. And I mean, like I mentioned before, my home track's Barber, and something that I love about Barber is it has a lot of the technicality, but it also has some of the commitment. But it doesn't have the commitment of a Road Atlanta or a VIR. It's not quite that high of an average speed. And what's interesting about Barber is that there's only really one place on the track where you really attack the brake pedal full 10 out of 10, 100% braking. And what I like about NCM is you have several opportunities to do that, so you get that kind of reset that you mentioned earlier, where you kind of get that deep breath, that relaxing, and you can kind of separate the track. And there's a couple of places where you can go, okay, because I made a mistake 2 or 3 corners ago, now I have this hard braking occurrence, and I can reset and get back up to speed, and it's not going to affect my lap. And you can kind of work on it. Whereas if I have that happen at Barber, I really only have before turn 5 or after turn 5. You can't break it down into any smaller sections. And I think NCM, when you're talking about people learning it, and it's a challenging track to learn, and we want people to learn it because that's how you get people to come back and spend their money with you and do events there. I think it lends itself to that kind of sector analysis of, okay, I'm going to look at 2 through 6 and 7 through 13 and then 14 through 16, right? You can really look at it kind of that way because you've got those different parts of the track, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it makes it easier so if you show up for a time trial nationals or a NASA Great Lakes or a Binge Tokyo or something like that, you can show up, and as you're kind of working your program, working your data and everything like that, we all get into our heads sometimes, right? If I make a mistake, I have to have a short memory to be able to move forward and grow. If you kind of think of it in a way where I can break the racetrack down into 4 or 5 sectors and okay, I made a mistake there, but that doesn't matter. I've got 3/4 of the lap left. I think that helps in having an open mind to learning and a little bit more of a positive kind of approach, as opposed to, oh man, I messed up that corner. This lap's done. Now we got to wait for all the way back onto the front straight, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge plus of NCM. But Matt, we're gonna wrap it up. We've been on here almost 45 minutes, and we've had an awesome crowd, and we appreciate all the questions from everybody. But what are your parting thoughts or anything that you want to plug? Make sure people know about, and then I'll end with a quick wrap up after that.
Yeah, just the same thing we tell everybody is, before you buy that next part, before you do anything, seat time yields the most results. But we're really looking forward to the SCCA Time Trial Nationals. This is the first of 9 more years, 10 years, baby, of the Time Trial Nationals being hosted in Bowling Green at NCM Motorsports Park. We also have the NASA race late October, NASA Great Lakes. They're backup races for this year. And then we've got November 2nd and 3rd, I believe, are the dates. We've got a group called Binge Tokyo, which is a little bit more of a younger crowd, but a little bit more time trial kind of focus. You get some really, really cool, really, really fast cars that show up, kind of similar to the Good Life crowd that show up to those, and you can kind of put yourself up some of the best drivers, some of the coolest cars in the country.
That's awesome. I've heard good things about Binge Tokyo, but that's I couldn't have said it any better myself. We will be Baker and myself, and Baker sitting right over here, will be at Time Trials Nationals in a couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. We have tons of people signed up. We're already sold out for Apex Pro demos. I say sold out, it's free, but we are already fully committed, and we'll be back in October. We're going to post real quick. Tomorrow night, we've got a Mid-Ohio webinar that myself and Anthony Magnoli are going to be doing. Not tomorrow night, Wednesday night. I'm sorry. Baker, if you could please post the link in the comments for that if you guys want to join us. It's only $50 to sign up. It's going to be a Q&A session, a lot of pre-prepared material. Some of it you'll get after the fact. You'll get a link with the video recording. It's pretty high value, meant for those of you who are going to NASA Championships at Mid-Ohio in a couple of weeks, which is another amazing racetrack. But actually, John Allen just said if you can learn NCM, that speed's portable anywhere, and he thinks that you can take it to Mid-Ohio as well. Actually specifically mentioned Mid-Ohio, so that's great info. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off, guys. We'll see you back. I won't be here next week. I'm going to be on my honeymoon. I'm not telling you where I'm going to go, but you can watch me on Instagram, and I might post. I probably won't. I might forget my phone. Baker might not let me take it. We'll see what happens. But I'll see you guys later. Thanks very much, Matt. I'm going to end the live video. We can keep talking offline, and everybody else here can just wonder what we're communicating about. See you guys later, Facebook.